All right, so I'm an Anunnaki experiencer now. I've had experiences with every kind of creature imaginable. I've been to a council with 100,000 distinct individual beings, and I'll talk about that later. So, and then we're going to be doing the Anunnaki part 1, part 2. This is the experiencer part, and my husband, Dr. Lessin, is going to take over the screen in the next hour and do the Anunnaki. And the Anunnaki are very important. So who are the Anunnaki? Are they giants? They were very tall, 8 to 12 feet tall, maybe 14. I've seen many of them. Did they create human beings? Let's see if I can move things out of the way. Okay. What do they look like? Are they humanoid? Are they reptoid? Do they have wings? There's many depictions of the Anunnaki with wings, and some people think they're bird people. Were they really bird people like this, or were these masks? And we see this all through time. These bottom depictions, I think, is their authentic form, what they really look like. And over time, when they started to interact with humanity, they went cryptic and they started wearing masks. And the reason being is they were vulnerable. They may be immortal, but they're vulnerable. Are they dragons? So I will give you the dragon connection, and that's why they're called the dragon family. And they are the ones at the top of the dung heap here, on the top of the pyramid. They're above the pyramid. And then how did I come to meet them? So here's how I came to meet the dragon at the end of time. My name is Janet Lessin. I've been prepared since infancy. Many of us come in and are ambassadors to this mission, and we are prepared since infancy. We have some of our memories intact sometimes, and they have to quiet us down. And then we uncover things just like the rest of humanity. And I met the dragon, the Anunnaki, and the Golden Mother Dragon beneath Johnston Atoll, where I was stationed as a civilian working for the military. And when I got back to Maui with my husband here, I was summoned to the Galactic Federation as an ambassador from 3D human being life, Earth life. So this is what happens in the world. The elephant's in the room, and we each hold a piece of the elephant. We're very important. Each and every one of us, we are a piece of the puzzle, and we are essential to the evolution of consciousness and to this grand awakening and ascension process that we're within right now. And we suffer from pluralistic ignorance, and we profess one thing while we do another. Pluralistic ignorance makes us sheeple, and we've got to wake up in this. It makes us puppets. And this ignorance keeps us chained to an evil and perverted matrix. There's Neo, and we're constantly taking the wrong pill. We got to wake up. Most of us privately reject the norm, like the emperor's new clothes, and we begin to accept the norm, and we start acting like a bunch of sheeple and following the emperor and doing as he wishes. And we assume others accept the fiction, but no one believes, but everyone thinks that everybody else believes. That's the lie. We publicly go along with the lie. And we suffer from the bystander effect. We just sit by and we watch people die and suffer, and we go, I'm not going to do anything about it. We're the bystanders. And this bystander effect slowly, and pluralistic ignorance and the bystander effect, slowly kills us all. It's killing our planet. We need to wake up. We're like on the Enterprise, and they've already launched the self-destruct, and we're on a 10-second countdown. And we, humanity, need to wake up and pay attention. And so there's been millions that have had experiences with extraterrestrials, and now we're in a generation where people they have the need to tell. I'm here, and my whole crew that I work with locally and globally, we're here to help provide a forum for people to tell their experiences, whether they are anonymous or using their name. They have a need to tell. And so we also suffer from the more we think we're talking about only ourselves, the more we realize we're speaking about everyone. And there is nothing in the human condition that is alien to any of us. So the Wizard of Oz, it's 7:30 in the morning for me, sorry. Too much coffee. The Wizard of Oz hides behind the curtain. And, you know, who's really running this reality? So that's part of this journey, is to discover who's at the top of the pyramid, who's running this reality. And of course, there are many, 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 many factions. But one of the main threads we explore is who is behind our secret governments that are controlling this planet. Cognitive dissonance is a feeling of discomfort that results from holding two conflicting beliefs, so we suffer. And there's a discrepancy between the beliefs and behaviors, and something must change in order to eliminate or reduce this dissonance. And so experiencers often suffer. They can't really believe what's going on, they suffer. And then this is me. Someone told me I was delusional, and I almost fell off my unicorn. So that's me, the Aquarian, here to lead us, if I can, the best I can, to this awakening, because that's why I came here to this earth. And so I'm going to cover my paranormal experiences from childhood to the current time, and how the Greys in the U.S. military took me to the Joint Military ET base under Johnson Atoll. I was there from December 95 till I think it was February of 97. And I'm in touch with my higher selves in many forms. There's more than one higher emanation of Janet Lessin, and I identify with Nimma and Enki and Joy, and they communicate with me, especially when I do sacred tantric rituals, journeys. So journey work on spirituality, meditation, opening up your chakras helps you connect personally and directly with extraterrestrials, interdimensionals. And then I represented the Earth to the Galactic Council. There are many, many, many ambassadors. I am nothing special. Any one of us could be an ambassador, maybe an ambassador. Just become aware. And you can see yourself before the council and create conscious contact for yourself. This is something that each and every one of us is able to do. And this is my book. There you go, Dance of the Souls. And I use the analogy of the hero's journey, because we're all here in this 3D Earth human form in a hero's journey to awaken in the amnesia that we agreed to do. So what's a hero and who are the heroes? Well, you're the heroes, obviously. What makes a hero, and is it who you are, or is it what you do? So what if you wake up in the middle of this dream called life and you find you're already in the middle of the journey? So that's what happens to a lot of us. We become awake, conscious, and aware. We go, I woke up, I woke up. I hear this every day. People call me, I woke up, I woke up. And it's really delightful. So you're like Bilbo and your Gandalf yanks you out of your normal life and away to adventure. Sometimes you need just someone to wake you up, and you end up fighting dragons and you face the monster. See, we're all it and everything. So when you eventually face the monster, you face yourself, but eventually you have to do all the stuff in the middle. And so she is like the dragon mother of people. I'll try to get to that in this story. And then when you look one-to-one into the soul, the apparent other, especially if you look in the right eye, this is very tantric, you could see all the way through the continuum to the core of existence. And there's where you find forgiveness, because we created this paradigm in order to create these experiences to diversify creation. And that's what we're doing. We're all gods co-creating with Source to diversify this existence. And so in part one, I'm going to share these paranormal extraterrestrial contact and experiences from childhood until now. And science might reject my tales, but maybe this presentation will awaken you. I have I think most of the people watching this are awake and we're preaching to the choir, but perhaps this will get shared and like a candle, lighting and awakening up people one by one by one by one. And it starts, the hero's journey starts in the ordinary world. So we're in this illusion. We think this is reality. We think this is ordinary. And I was spiritually asleep. Although actually, I came in pretty awake. But even though you're awake, you have to have an operating personality so you can walk in this world so people don't slam you. Okay. And so I became conscious in the middle of the journey and realized there was a higher perspective of what I was experiencing, and I needed to integrate with that. So here's the Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journeys chart. I recommend you look it up, and it's a wonderful system which explains many people what's happening. And so what I experienced, you might too. and I can't read the top of my screen. So there's a call to adventure, and the hero faces something that launches her on her adventure. So what I realized when I went through many years of therapy. My husband and I facilitate experiencers. We basically do counseling. It's really psychotherapy, but we're not allowed to use that term because the Illuminati owns it. If you don't have their license, you get fined. So we're hypnotherapists, but we do more than just hypnotherapy. We really we've been together 19 years. We spend a lot of time in the first 15 years, especially working on one-on-ones and in groups with people, helping them go in and remembering the pieces of their soul that they've left behind somewhere else in existence in the continuum. So I realized that I had tried to come in 52, and my mother's miscarriage was actually me, and so then I finally was born February 6, 1954, and from my research, I'm a researcher as well, that's when Eisenhower contacted, the ETs contacted Eisenhower, and that's where it was allegedly agreed to start trading human experimentation for technology. And I don't know, we're trying to piece together those meetings, but that's a mystery. And that marks beginning from what my research is showing of the accelerated human abduction activity, although we've been contacted all along. So I postulated, as I was waking up my journey, am I part of Ike's alien contact program, which began when I was born? Seems like a strong correlation with that. There's initially the refusal to call. The hero tries to refuse the adventure because she's afraid. So I remember finally struggling to stand up, and I said, no, I'm not here again. So there was reluctance. And then I really realized in my research that both sides, my grandfathers on both sides of my family were Masons. And recently we pieced together that the grandfathers on Sasha's both sides were Masons. So these Masons, whoever they may be, I know there's a public thing they do, which is very kind, and they do a lot of charity work, and they're of course the people at the top, and that's how it all works. You have people in religions and they're kind and loving, and then there's people at the top and they're doing their weird perverted stuff. So anyway, and they arrange marriages because we are of the bloodline. And both Lincoln and Booth, the hidden hand gestures. So my correlation with Lincoln and uncovering my connection to the Illuminati and the Anunnaki was that my uncle Gideon Wells, right here, on my mother's side, he was the Secretary of the Navy. Now, basically, Sasha read the book, I didn't, but he said, the United States wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Wells, because he saved the Union. So we're in this reality because of my direct ancestor, Gideon Wells, which is really weird, right? But also my remembrance in therapy and just some spontaneous remembrances is that I was like this little boy at Lincoln's death, and I saw his soul exiting his body, and I said, does anybody see this? So I'm more than human. I have this, I'm psychic. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but yeah, I witnessed his soul passing through his body. I passed out of his body. Okay, so this is just tying it up. So I pondered, am I of the bloodline? And so I was tracked coming in. I was told by a whistleblower, and I am connected to the Illuminati bastard line. And I have other friends that are discovering, oh yeah, I'm in this bloodline, but I'm the bastard. I'm not the royals. Don't have all the money. And so through my regression therapy, I remembered that I died around 1900, and I reincarnated into this lifetime as Janet. So that's how I came to this lifetime. And I was indeed tracked. I was told by a whistleblower that they had a facility in the naval base, I think it was in Virginia, and he said that they were tracking me coming in. So some of the souls are players in the game, and they track us coming in. And that made sense because there was always this tension on me. But as I'm going to say repeatedly, I am not the only one. There are we're all important pieces of the puzzle, but there are some people that are here for this acceleration process, and I think a lot of them are right here today listening to this program. So when I was a child, they took me, my grandfather took me to the Masonic Lodge in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and this is representation. This is my grandmother, and I was very young. I was actually newborn. They took me to a room. I remember the room was something like this with a lot of antiques and big table. But I remember the table was really huge and glossy. And the men around the table were dressed not exactly like this, but similar to this. And it was all men, of course. My grandmother wasn't allowed in. She just was. She carried me to the threshold, and then my grandfather carried me in, and he wasn't ever comfortable with handling me. So when I was put down as a baby, I stood up, and I was in a human form, and I was only about 12 to whatever, how many inches tall. I don't know how many inches I was when I was born, but the height that I was in an adult form, but the same height. And I spoke to them. And I don't remember the exact details, and it's not time. That'll be revealed later, but basically it's about this timeline that we're on and what's coming, and there's nothing they could do, and they were very terrified. But they weren't allowed to kill me, so they had to let me grow up. But my mother tried to kill me. So my mother didn't know what to make of me. One time she came in and I was flying around the room. I went to a conference years later, and I met up with a guy who said I was flying as a child in an orphanage, and he said anybody else who was flying come into the back of the room and talk to us. So there was about 13, 14 of us, and we had memories of flying before we were 2 years old. So, and then I researched, here we go, history, and of course there's people that have been able to levitate throughout time. And so I, like many of us, come from another world, and we come to Earth. We come in here, we have this stranger in a strange land phenomenon. We don't feel like we fit, but here we are. We're on a mission, and we make the best of it. So when I was 18, because I was too awake and conscious of where I came from, and I wasn't quite integrating, all the beings came around me. There were just hundreds of them to say farewell, and they finally the last one came, and they all did what's called puja. They look in your eyes, and tears were going down my eyes, and then they said, okay, time. And then there was this loud crack, and I screamed, and I started crying, and my mother came in, and I could no longer speak. I was able to speak, and that's what freaked out my mother. It's like, how's this baby talking intelligently like this? And it's like, at that point, my language was babbled, it was garbled, and it was just baby talk, although I could still think in adult terms. But that started to fade over time because I had to be human, just like everybody else. So we meet the mentor, the hero encounters someone who can advise her and prepare her for the journey ahead. And so in spring of '58, I started to interact with these Vimanas, and they look like castles. There's many representations of Vimanas. If you just Google it, it's amazing what you can see on the internet. It's like the collective consciousness is telling us that it's right in front of us. We just have to follow our noses and Google things. And you can see this is the ancient depiction of them coming into Vimanas. And so they make Vimanas to resemble what came down from the sky. And of course there's large and small Vimanas, and I was interacting with many that look like castle. I think that Camelot was probably a Vimana that came down and settled, and sometimes the reason why Camelot disappeared is because it just left. Here we go. There's the representation of Mount Olympus, which is Vimana, and this is supposed to be a representation of Sinai. And we wonder about Mount Sinai, what's going on there. That's probably Vimana came down and people gathered around it. And of course, they could project holograms. Okay, back to the Janet story. So I was picking flowers outside, and a mothership, this is in '58. I was a young girl. I was 4 years old and teleported me on board a ship. Another representation of that. And I found myself in a theater. Here's Star Trek. I love Star Trek. And the theater was constructed for my convenience. I needed some kind of construct. A lot of these ships and are constructed in the moment for the convenience of the experience. They don't need to be in solid form because many beings don't need ships. But I needed a ship because I was human form. And they welcomed me like I was some kind of returning royalty. And once the screen came up, I was shown 24 different multiverses. And the first image showed the Earth being blown up and powdered into stardust. They showed all these different scenarios of destruction, and then they started shifting until there was more and more life and less destruction. And they showed me civilizations destroyed. And this is the typical thing that happens to experiencers. But then, you know, there's people escaping, and I was crying because it was just so overwhelming to witness all this destruction. And finally, I talked to Tolik, and I said, there's 24, and he said, yes, there's 12 negative and 12 positive. And I said, yes. So it was good confirmation. Then the scene shifted and the terrible alternatives were over. These are all possible future multiverses that we as the observer participant can decide to take that journey, take that road, take that channel and live as our lives. So we are always the chooser. And so they were showing me that I'm the chooser. So there were scenes where people were emerging from the ruins and celebrating, and then there were utopian ones. So the last 12 were different types of utopians getting better and better and better. And so I started to stop crying. I relaxed, and I realized there's hope for our world. I loved our world. And some of them just seemed too kind of airy-fairy. The ultra-utopian options left nothing to do, nothing to achieve. You know, they kind of seemed plastic and artificial. They were just so goody, goody, goody. So they asked me at one point, telepathically said, this is what a sample, just a sample of all the possibility for existence. You know, they're just giving me 24 as an example. And which one do you choose? They asked me, which reality do you choose? And I like the third one from the end. So I said, well, let's do that one. So this is kind of representation of where we're going based on Janet's choice. And my job was done. I could go. So when they took me home the long, slow ways. This is kind of Pittsburgh in '58 when I lived there, and it was very polluted and the air was kind of yucky. So they showed how they transformed it and cleaned up the air right in front of my eyes, and then we took it back to my neighborhood, and it was very, very colorful. So what I realized is that I was taking high noon, and so they were returning me at sundown. And so when I was teleported back to the Earth, now this is a physical teleportation, I returned and I looked and kind of hesitate before I went to the house, and they said that you have come to do that which will benefit all of humankind. And this is a common experiencer message that we get, that we are on some kind of almost like a Christed mission to come here and help humanity. And I was just overwhelmed with joy, and I felt like my life had meaning and purpose. But I realized when I walked back into the house that I cannot tell those parents, those people that raised me, and the brother and sister, because they just wouldn't understand. I had, even though it's for the wisdom, to not say something prematurely. So crossing threshold. So the hero leaves her ordinary life and crosses the threshold into adventure. But my existence was not going to be easy. So also later that year, a neighbor sexually assaulted me, and my mom tried to pull him off of me. But I died. I died during the experience. And I went out of my body to heaven. And back on Earth, my mother and the neighbor tried to revive me. And while I was dead, I went through a life review and was shown several lifetimes. And these are all connected to, we think these are different things, but the paranormal and the extraterrestrials and interdimensionals and life, death, it's all connected. So I met my personal guide. We all have a personal guide, and I went to my council. We had all these discussions. When I noticed that where I went was very similar to the where I was when I was on mothership. It was the same energy, and it felt safe, like I had returned home. And then they showed me, once again, I'm looking at timelines. So they showed me the timelines that hurt my family. So these are all lessons for me. In one timeline, my mom went to prison. Another one, my dad killed the guy, Harry, who abused me, and he went to prison. And in another lifetime, my brother couldn't take it that his little sister had died that way, and he committed suicide. And another one, my sister overdosed and killed herself on prescription drugs. And they, basically, if I stayed dead, we were on the disaster timeline. I was like, oh goodness, and Earth would perish. So all these things, the personal and the global, and if I returned and did my life's work, my family and the world would end up in a positive timeline. That's a lot of responsibility for one time. So everybody needs to do this. Everybody needs to realize that we are, if we find ourselves going down a negative road, we can shift to a positive timeline. So which timeline do you choose? So, and I really wanted to stay. I felt very conflicted because it felt more loving there. The energy was better. Earth is very difficult energetically. It's dense, and many experiencers say that same thing. But I had to come back, so I did, and I'm I have a good life. So I chose life, and then when I made that decision, I was back in my body, and despite all the hard times, we are on a positive timeline, and goodness and love will prevail in the end. So every time you see yourself personally, shift and readjust, and then you get back in the positive timeline. So in 59, they put the tracking device, they put an implant up my nose, and they put one behind my ear. I have a lot of implants, and I realized that the guardians watch over me, and when I need to know things, they don't reveal things to you all at once because it's overwhelming, for one thing. Also, there are other people that can read your mind, and I am being protected and hidden from those people. You're protected, watched, and your memories are blocked for your own safety, and you're never alone. And now, along the line, you get your allies and enemies, and you learn how to endure the test to meet friends, foes, etc. And so there was a being, I think many people have encountered this guy, George. He's like a hooded being. And so from 58 to 66, I battled with this demon type being named George. And George kind of tried to suck out my soul like that, But mine was through the third eye chakra and the crown chakra. But there's people who have had these experiences, and they put it in fiction. Here's Harry Potter dealing with the Dementor, or Demeter, how we pronounce it. But mine was coming out more like that one, like third eye chakra, yeah. And so I would break away from George and run into the house, and George at one point would say, "Oh, that's who you are," like realization of who I was. It's like we were in a Groundhog Day type time loop. I did that over and over and over. And over time, I realized he was reptilian. When I was a child, I could not see his face. But when I was older and did therapy on it with my husband, I finally got his face. But this whole experience is splitting. I developed subpersonalities and alters to deal with the traumatic part of my life. And then I had a functioning personality which could do life and go to school and interact with the other people. So this is what happens when we have severe trauma, and some of these things are traumatic only because they're otherworldly. So I basically, by the time I met my husband in 1970, it was 97, and we finally did some therapy with the Stones, Hal and Sidra Stone. I had like about 18, 19 subpersonalities, but they all were there to protect me, and it was time to reintegrate. So we call that in psychotherapy soul retrieval. So it was time to retrieve the missing pieces of your soul, and this happens to everybody because life is traumatic. So one of these episodes with my mother was my handler, and so in '59, we were all watching Peter Pan, and we got real excited. It must have been some programming in that, because my brother, sister, and I, we were just like jumping up and down, and in a rage, my mom took me down this, and we had a stairwell, and she threw me over the stairwell. So that further traumatized me. All these things happened. And then I had ghosts all the time. They were different energies. My grandmother was very loving and kind. She was, so I had to integrate the paranormal, the extraterrestrial, and all these things that were happening over time. One of the things I started to do to figure out the pieces of the puzzle is I started going astrally very, very young. And nightly, I would just go out of my body and just trying to figure it out and connect, sending my soul out to connect with the extraterrestrials and interdimensionals and those who would speak with me to give me the pieces of the puzzle. And eventually I went down under the ground. A lot of people were talking about the inner earth and all the different civilizations down there. So when I went, I would go out of my crown chakra and down through my basement of my house, and there's a little entryway, and I was in some kind of, it was like my astral body, but I could actually feel walking on these, through these, they look like wine barrels. And I don't know if it was wine, it might have been something else, but they had these, they were gigantic. They had handles that were, you know, only giants could move. And and the light was illuminated from up above, and there was no kind of light fixtures or candles. And they were highly polished, and they had these giant, so the cobblestones were not the perspective of, back in the 50s, a lot of the streets in Pittsburgh were cobblestone, but the cobblestones that I was walking over were gigantic. And eventually I went into places similar like this, and I kept going down and down and down. And then I went further into the caverns, and then there were cities in there too, in ruins. So I went there. I'm not sure what that meant, but I did. So in '61, when I was 7, my mother strangled me, and I died once again. So I keep having these near-death, otherworldly, extraterrestrial experiences, and they all feel the same. When I was dead, my guides helped me fix my broken neck, and then I went back to my life and my mother, and I was more like the adult, and I tried to comfort my mother. She couldn't help herself, and I knew she was out of control, and there was really nowhere I could go. I had to be with this family, so I had to learn to cope and to communicate and forgive. Constantly, life is about forgiveness. So, and then all during this time, I was living in Pittsburgh, which was a hotbed of UFO activity, and whenever I would walk with people or have sleep outs, people would see UFOs. So I would invite my friends to say, hey, you want to see a UFO? Yes. And these were, they were large, you know, like 50 feet across, and they were pretty low to the ground, and they were bright colors like blue, orange, yellow, red. And they definitely were not the moon or the sun, because you could see those in the sky as well. And then my mother, who was always trying to figure this out and angry at me, and she pushed me down the steps, and I knocked out my front teeth. And I just have realized that she loved me in one hand, but she was programmed and crazy, and so I just had to deal with that. So the extraterrestrials helped me. In '64, I was taken by the praying mantis. I was at a local skating rink, and a boy molested me from behind, but he had clothes on. And he told me he got me pregnant, which I didn't understand because I was very young. I didn't know how sex works. So I went home, and I'm hypersensitive. I have super emotions. And when I went home, I wanted to die. And I really had the ability to just die, to just leave my body for good. Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me. Okay, so this mother mantis held me. I was very little, even though I was 10, I was about that size, and her arm is a good depiction, and sent me loving energy through me, and until I wanted to live again. So once again, when I have a traumatic experience, I go and I get recharged, and then I feel like, okay, I can come back and do this. Okay, so just other things, ghosts walk through me. I saw the 68, which was a few years after Barney Hill. Similar, it looked very similar. Like you could see the craft in the beings in there. Couldn't quite make out what they looked like, but you could see them And while they came up from behind me, I felt them. I turned around, and they were telepathically communicating with me. I'd say almost 99%, maybe more, of the communication is telepathic. They don't really use their mouths very much. And they stayed for a while. 69, my house is where I grew up is a vortex. Like I showed you, I went down, but there was a stairwell that was closed, and my girlfriend opened the door, and this type of being, like out of Poltergeist, came out snarling. It was very amazing. Okay, so I got married in 70, and when I was married, I started having witnesses all through my childhood. I'd say, "Do you want to see a ghost? You want to see a UFO?" So I'd invite people over to my house, and they'd have experiences. And a ghost kept knocking at my bedroom door, and my husband witnessed it. But I wanted children, and the ETs kept taking them, and they said, "You will never have children." So I've never been able to give birth here. Okay, so, and also my first husband was a hitter, and so eventually I just left. I had no children, no reason to stay. So I was also at that time suffering from battered wife syndrome. Couldn't even get myself to leave for a long time, but finally I did. And, you know, it was very traumatic. Splits you further. Approach 6, setbacks occur, sometimes causing a hero to try a new approach or adopt new ideas, and I kept getting pneumonia. So my out was to get the pneumonia and die. So I was conflicted. I wanted to go, I wanted to stay. I had a mission. At one point, I had seen Superman. What was that, 1977, I think, or 78? Yeah. And so an ET came looking like Superman and did a healing with me, huge healing with me. And when I woke up, I said, "Okay, I can do this." So when I left husband once and husband one, and met and married husband two, and I moved to State College, where I started the Penn State UFO discussion group. It was one of the earliest, I guess, in the planet. And there were many people who reported these hooded beings, and they described them as reptilian. And so I started getting that connection. And then our members were, at that time, they were interacting with grays and reptilians. There were many others. And there was one man that told me about how he was surrounded in a field by a dozen of these hooded beings. So the hooded being phenomena. So I wondered, now when I was making this presentation, are Dementors or reptilians the same thing? So, and then when I would come home from this discussion group, I would ask for proof. You know, I had a long drive from the Penn State to my home out in the farm fields, and so they would follow me. These shooting stars would follow me, and I'd say, "Are you real?" And then they would shoot directly across my hood of my car, you know, and it was like, "Okay, you're real." Ordeal: the hero experiences a major hurdle or obstacle, such as a life or death crisis. So around that time, when I was in my second marriage, I was told I had lung disease and I had 6 months to live. So here we go. And I was sad. And I had tried to have children with my second husband, and they just kept taking my babies. I used to time things because I was doing infertility work, and right when I was fertile, they would come and take my eggs. So I realized, and that just destroyed our marriage. So that, and they took my husband one time. He didn't like that. So my marriage was pretty dysfunctional, and I knew if I stayed there, I wasn't going to live very long. Oh, and during this period, yeah, I asked for proof one time. I said, "If this is real, if there's a God, show me proof." And this is part of what freaked out my ex-husband. I got scratched something back from side to side, from the entire back, and he saw them. He says, "What in the world happened to your back?" And of course, he was very like mainstream. He could not understand, and that was beginning of the end. So I ended up meeting a young man named Ed, and this is him now. And the reward, anyway, reward. So after surviving death, I had a new hope for new marriage. So I moved to Hawaii. I moved all the way across from Pennsylvania to Hawaii. And he was part of a depth of civil mind control, which was very popular in those days. And he was able to astrally project and have sex. So he told me about it at first. I said, oh yeah, well, if you can, come to me. So he did. And that started our romance. That's when I was in Pennsylvania. And so I said, okay, come to me. And he did. And so we were astral lovers for a while. I guess I was cheating on my second husband. I don't know. I was married and miserable. But I had what was called a Kundalini awakening. And I didn't know what the word meant. I asked Ed, how can I get rid of this screen? Okay, so I'll fast forward because we don't have much time. So I moved to Hawaii. I did all kinds of stuff, table tipping at a group and channeling, and these are all part of a spiritual awakening. And then I got taken out of another major abduction with Ed, right out, just like the New York lady, right out of the side of the building, a tall building. And this is just, they returned us. I met another man, and I had the blood in the bed. We woke up flat like this, and there was blood all over the bed, and there wasn't a mark on either of us. And then I had the, what do you call it? What are these people here? They're solid black shadow people, yeah. But Jason was abusive, so I had to leave him. And I was, ended up going to a place called Johnston Atoll. And Johnston Atoll is a military base 800 miles southwest in the Pacific. And there's an underwater installation right here. See that little place that juts out? This is where they took me. So this is a big underwater installation. And the official story is that they carved this out for the submarines in World War II. So this is an artificial construct, and it really exists, but now it's abandoned. But I was there from 95 to 97, about 11, 12 months. Okay, so there we go. And here's just some pictures of it. So it's a real thing, and I ended up with getting another relationship, but that didn't last. And this is a JOC building, and it's where we worked. And on the third floor, there was an ET that I walked by every day. But I could just feel him communicating with me, like touching he was teasing me. And he wouldn't really talk, but you can feel the vibration when they were communicating with you. It's like it's right in here. And I would stop and I'd try to look into the room and get a peek. But anyway, so I knew they were there. Plus, the night I had arrived on the island, this guy came over and said, "You're at a joint U.S. military ET base." And I said, "Oh, really?" Okay, so I finally had a relationship on the island with a young man named Vinny. And they came one night and they took us right out of our beds. And there were soldiers with them. There were 6 military and 6 Greys, and they had the long kind of bulbous end fingers. Yeah, they were kind of bulbous end of the fingers. No, I didn't see nails, but could have had nails. But so this is what you call my lab's abduction. They took us to the beach, and it was the middle of the night, and a ship came in and landed. And the small Greys came out and joined the other Greys, and the Greys that were carrying us put us down. And so Vinny and I just looked at each other, we grabbed our hands, and we just calmly walked into the ship, which went underwater to the military base I showed you before. It's kind of some resemblances of the craft. And they took Vinny to the examination table that they always have, and he was not happy. He was struggling. And then finally they came and, do what they do, and he stopped protesting, typical thing, and he was very quiet. And there were 3 types. There was a real tall mantis. It was almost like a mantis mix. I can't quite get a depiction, but it was very tall. And it was androgynous, so it was.
Just to let you know, Janet, you have about 5 minutes left. Not to interrupt. I'm sorry. You have about 5 minutes left.
That's okay. I'll fast forward. Fast forward. Okay. So anyway, we're going to get to the dragon. So I was sitting there on a chair like this, and they came over and got me, and they had me put on a gown. So and I had these very pretty shoes, and I was wondering what they're about. I knew there was some purpose for it. So as I walked, I floated, and then I was once again going down, and then behind me fell into place these beautiful tall Anunnaki, and they started out about 6 foot tall, and they were like super humans. Like everyone could be a model on the cover of a magazine, and they all dressed like they were going to a ball, and nobody was dressed alike, and they kept getting taller and taller. They started out 6 to 7 feet tall, and they kept saying, is this the one? Is today the day? Is she the key? And they were all saying this telepathically. Is today the day? And more and more would join, and as they joined, they kept getting taller and taller, and so the ones at the end were like very 12 feet tall or larger, and then there was a really like masterful guy, kind of like this, but he had his wife with him, so they couldn't find one. And I finally stopped, and I said, how many are here? And we were deep in a cavern, and they responded telepathically. There was 1,000 of them. And I asked, are these Anunnaki? And they said yes. And I had known about the Anunnaki since I started studying them in the early 80s. And there was this beam of light, circle light beckoned me, and I went and stood in it. Eventually, there was a large wall that was more solid, but it was obsidian. And when I stood in the beam, the wall dissolved, and we were looking at the feet of a giant beast. And this beast projected an avatar, which stood in front of me, and we stood eye to eye, same height. And intense love flowed through us. And so I became like the conduit. We stared into each other's souls, and we remembered our oneness. We were connected. And the real form of the dragon was gigantic like that. And I was really, if I stood beside her in a real form, I'd be like the size of a mouse. But she was very kind and loving and gentle. And she said that she was the mother of her species. We started to telepathically communicate, and they'd been under the earth for millions of years. And she told me that even though we look nothing like her, she is our mother too. We shared DNA. That's all we have to do is share DNA. And then she loves us all, Anunnaki and human alike. So while we were communicating, I became a conduit, and everybody started communicating at once. So we went into like this beehive type of vibration of communication. So it was beyond, he was like Lucy, the film Lucy. All of a sudden I was in hyper speed and able to handle all this communication. It was all coming through me, and then out to everybody and back through me and up to the dragon. And I don't know why they needed me, so I guess I'm some kind of translator. And I don't have the details of this conversation because it wasn't ready, but it was all good, all kind and loving, and she was sharing me about the origins of the universe and the Lyrans, and it goes on, that we've had generations of DNA experimentation throughout the universe, combining in myriad forms of existence. So there are just so many diverse forms of being, and that they were originally a space being, and they don't need spaceships, and Lyran and dragon blood. And this is why we have the symbol of the Lyrans and the dragons. They're core to our DNA structure. So let me fast forward to the council meetings. Okay, well, I don't know, do you want to ask some questions maybe? We have a few minutes left.
I think if you want to just go to the dragon, that's about all the time we have to just wrap that up, and we're going to bring Sasha right on. Okay,
anyway, so that's pretty much the end right there. Let me go to the council meeting. So there's the halls of Amentes at the halls of Amenti are inside the core of the earth, which is an interdimensional portal. That's where the Watchers, they have a facility on every sphere, and they monitor life everywhere as it evolves. and it's you know, accessible through, it's the singularity, the continuum through existence, and they are everywhere. We are everywhere, and they are everywhere. So Vinny and I remembered our abduction. We talked about it later. Let me see if I can get to the. Then I met Sasha, moved to Maui. Okay, I can't get there fast enough. So we worked through the trauma, and here's the. Eventually they said, oh, you're with him. So they came while we were here, and so you can use Tantra to. And psychotherapy and entheogens and meditation, and you can awaken your Kundalini energy by clearing your chakras. Your chakras have psychological and energy blocks based on your trauma in your life, and when you finally clear your chakras, then you have what's called a Kundalini awakening, and it reconnects you to source, to your totality of existence, to through your amnesia, and you become conscious, enlightened, and aware. Although you don't kind of stay that way, you just keep going back in and out of consciousness. But eventually you wake up and you go, okay, what's going on here? How can I help other people wake up? So then you do presentations at conferences. And so there's a dragon within that awakens, and that's your Kundalini. That's a way of reconnecting with source, remembering who you are, reconnecting with the extraterrestrials. You can put out the call by doing ritual, by doing using your sexual energy, using your spiritual meditative energy, and you can basically put out the call. And when you do, then you start consciously traveling through existence and consciously connecting. So anyway, I will give up the cue. Thank you, everybody.